Today's guest is Trevor Topfer, a digital veteran with over 20 years of experience, and in the past 3 years he has led several Web3 projects across e-commerce, digital fashion and animation. He is also the executive director of Blockchain New Zealand, advising on blockchain strategy, regulation and tech adoption. And just before we start, I want to just express this discussion includes insights from non-affiliated third parties and key opinion leaders. Binance provides this platform for informational and educational purposes only and is not responsible for any content or insights provided. This information should not be considered financial tax or investment advice from Binance. So with all that out of the way, let's get started. So you've been involved in like some form of digital technology for the last 20 years. What drew you to Web3 and blockchain and crypto?
So I was studying commerce law at the time, and then immediately changed my course, went into computer sciences and started trying to figure out this thing called the internet. Fast forward to Web 2. So Web 1, as we all know, was all about kind of reading and learning how to deal with information and categorize and handle information in a new way. We moved into Web 2, where it was more about sort of being able to participate in that, and digital streaming and streaming media became a thing. So that was my first VC startup, was in Web 2. In 2006, we sort of built this Shopify type product where we were streaming music and had a bit of a social media kind of component to it. And then around about 2012, so I was pretty early into the space, I discovered this thing called Silk Road. Do you remember the days you could go in via Tor and suddenly this whole dark web? I mean, I was seduced by it, right? Like the dark web, I have to find out what goes on in the dark web. So I went down the rabbit hole, and I actually bought a Bitcoin in, I think it was about 2012. It was $100 US, thereabouts. So,
if I remember correctly, Mount Gox.
Yes, and you had to use a torrent site to kind of So it's ridiculously complicated. I mean, it's still fairly complicated, but it was crazy then. I didn't really understand what I was doing. I was seduced by this dark web thing, and I bought a Bitcoin. And then about a year later, I sold that computer. So somewhere out there in Auckland, somebody has a $170,000 iMac. It's a 24-inch iMac, around about a 2010, 2011. So if you own one of those, you should be checking it. You might have a Bitcoin in there. So yeah, that was kind of I guess when I discovered what we now kind of call Web3, this blockchain crypto thing. But fast forward then to really taking it seriously when I started getting paid to take it seriously. And that was around the NFT thing, right? So 2020, 2021, around that sort of time, is when I think the last big wave of onboarding, and we're all still here, right? We're all still, believing in it. We're all still advocating for it. And I've been definitely very deep in it since then.
Absolutely. And you're also the executive director of BlockchainNZ. Tell me a bit about BlockchainNZ.
Sure. So BlockchainNZ is an industry body for advocating for blockchain and cryptocurrency enterprise in New Zealand. So we kind of act as like the bridge, right? My role really is to bring industry players and regulators and government together and try and facilitate a conversation that might lead to outcomes. So we advocate for industry, we have conversations and submissions to government, and we try and develop the infrastructure and the landscape for blockchain and cryptocurrency activity here in New Zealand. So yeah, it's a tough gig.
I mean, you would have like first-hand experience. What would you say is like the state of blockchain adoption in?
Good question. It's one I get asked a lot. And the fact that I get asked it a lot and I'm getting asked it more and more is probably an indicator of how the adoption of blockchain is going in New Zealand. Look, there's data out there. I think last time I checked, it was somewhere hovering around about 1 in 5 So that's a pretty big number. 1 in 5 Kiwis owns crypto. That's 1 million people in this country that own crypto, which makes it a market. So we have a market here. And I'm seeing more international interest in this space. So we're going to get into that in the podcast for sure. But so that's a really strong signal as well around it. Our membership at Blockchain New Zealand is growing, and it's growing organically again for the first time since the NFT run, right? When the NFT thing was happening, everybody wanted to be a member of Blockchain New Zealand. Then it died off like everything else, and now it's starting to see it come back again. So look, I think there's interest in the space domestically, like the people of New Zealand starting to care about crypto. They're starting to learn more about blockchain, digital identity, these concepts of Web3. But there's also institutional interest or commercial interest in the market here. And Binance is a great example of what that looks like, which is really exciting. So I think it's still very early days in New Zealand. We're way behind the region and way behind the world, but it's growing, and I think there's a much better conversation happening around it in New Zealand now, for sure.
Tomorrow I'm going to Dubai for
Token?
2049.
Yeah, I mean, you could almost argue that Dubai is 24/7, 365 now. It's for crypto and blockchain. I mean, they are the epicenter. They're the mecca of the universe for us on Earth. But Token 2049 is the big one, right? So all eyes are on the UAE now, and it'll be really interesting to see what comes out of that. So yeah, I was hoping to go. I can't get there, unfortunately. Too many things on my plate at the moment. But hope to hopefully you can tell me all about it. You can fly the BlockchainNZ flag while you're over there, and let them know that we exist.
And do you think companies like Binance or other institutions can happen?
Yeah. Oh, look, it's super important. I think Binance is already doing a lot. So, the fact that they're here, they have a presence in Auckland. I mean, Binance is a massive blockchain business, right? It's a huge company.
160 million users worldwide.
It's massive, right? And we're probably going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we face in New Zealand, and Binance are not immune to it, despite the fact that they're a large company by any metric, not just by crypto and blockchain metrics. They're a large company by any metric. So having them as seat at the table, like, I'm really, really grateful that I have Binance as a member of Blockchain New Zealand, because it's an enormous amount of kind of validity or validation to what we're doing to see companies like Binance participating. So that's a huge one. So having their voice at the table in my fight is huge. And the broader industry, I mean, Binance is the biggest player in New Zealand. They've got the largest by transaction volume in New Zealand. So most people in New Zealand who are playing in the crypto space or entering the crypto space are probably going to become Binance customers, or at least are going to become aware of Binance. So I think there's a great role around education and onboarding and the safety and helping people understand concepts like, its sovereignty and ownership and those complicated things that take a little while it's a very different way of approaching things that you've been doing in a certain way for a long time. They've got the infrastructure in place. You don't get to the size of Binance without actually making your product work and making it safe and secure. And look, it's a new developing market. And I can see the comment section on this video blowing up like, oh, but Binance had this happen and CZ and all that stuff. But that's a new emerging market, right? It's a new technology. It's an emerging market. It's growing faster than any market in human history. There's bound to be mistakes along the way. It's not always going to be perfect. That's okay, right? Like, you get the FTXs and those things happen. It's unfortunate, but it has happened in any other major industry that's rolled out. This is no different.
The idea is that you learn from it, and then you avoid.
And you understand what the next iteration needs to be to provide safe, secure places for people to participate. And so for companies like Binance, get into the region. There's 1 million people here that are interested in what is going on in this space. They're actively investing in this space. So, so Binance have got a great opportunity there, and any other major crypto blockchain companies that might happen to have been shared this through the magic ether. New Zealand is a thriving, growing market that is ripe, I think, for opportunity. both internal and external, from internal players and external players. So I think, Binance being here is a really strong signal of that, and I think they do a lot to help us in that respect. So yeah, again, super grateful for Binance and the role they play here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Are there any other sort of Web3 use cases that you think are still underhyped, or particularly underhyped, that should receive the recognition?
Yeah. It's interesting because it's a lot about attention. Look, I think all of Web3 is still very underhyped. I'm longing Web3. I mean, we're rebuilding the internet. That's what Web3 means. It's the third version of the internet. It's a big thing. It takes time, and it's gonna be a long road. I think there's been flurries of interest across, as we're going through that transition. But some of those things, the hype was legitimate in its theory, but not in practice, right? So what does that mean? I think NFTs and digital assets, and the idea of being able to validate and authenticate digital assets, that was what NFTs kind of were at their core. But it got badly executed. Lots of people scammed everybody and made money here, and then it was kind of fun. It was like a casino for a little while, and everybody's got good stories and bad stories about their time in that. But NFTs as a technology piece still have a very, very big place in all of this, and will have a very big place. So for me, the most underhyped part of all of this, and where I think the most attention should be played, is interoperable digital identity. What does that mean? So identity online is becoming your number one asset as a human being, and Web3 is ushering in the age of ownership. So if I can now own my data and own digital assets, and like cryptocurrencies, I keep them in a wallet, and that wallet becomes my online identity. As we grow, that's not just going to be a place where you store some cryptocurrencies that you're speculating on, your $100 worth of fart coin or whatever it is that you've got in your wallet. It's going to be your resume. It's going to be your health record. It's going to be your online reputation. All of those things are going to be built into your digital identity. And so as we get more and more infrastructure that supports that, so health companies building health records that can be on chain, that can be owned and stored in my wallet. The idea of interoperable digital identity, where my identity is persistent across different parts of my life, and I own and control access to it and ownership of it and the value of it, I think is where we get mass adoption, right? Like, I think that's the big one that everybody has to kind of get their head around before anything else can flow from that. So all of this cool stuff that we're building, digital assets are awesome, starting with gaming, but moving into all sorts of other areas. We're going to talk about tokenization of real world assets in a minute. I can feel the question coming. But there's a lot, all of these opportunities, they are all subsidiary to everybody participating. So what does that look like? It's building your own digital identity and taking that seriously. It's an asset now. Your identity is becoming something you own, not something you give freely. And I think that's the fundamental shift from Web 2 to Web 3. And the thing that needs to be hyped up more is get on chain and start to figure out how it works and what this concept of sovereignty is, and how I can leverage the things that I'm already doing to greater value, right, as this stuff builds out. So
yes. Moving on to the next topic is like on real world assets. And
Yes.
have you seen any interesting startups coming in New Zealand, or anything interesting happening?
Look, that's where it's at,
As an
right? I
asset.
think, and so for those of you who aren't kind of familiar with this concept of tokenization of real world assets, what does that mean? Up until recently, most of the trading in and around cryptocurrency, blockchain, Web3 has been digital assets, right? So NFTs were a digital asset, cryptocurrencies are a digital asset. So there's all of this digital stuff. But what we're actually starting to see now is the ability to take real world assets and tokenize them on chain. What does that mean? So the most obvious use case, and particularly for New Zealand, that and what I'm seeing in the market for sure, is the tokenization of real estate. So we've got a event coming up in June that is a panel discussion, speaker, etc., to talk about the tokenization of real estate in New Zealand. I know there's a couple of active products, but this is an enormous opportunity, I think, for New Zealand. And you hinted on it earlier on in the podcast when you were talking about if it's not property, no one gives a shit.
I know, in New
Because
Zealand, this is just New Zealand.
because
yes.
like, what is it? I don't know. I'm not an economist, so somebody can fact check me on this. But maybe 70% or more of the New Zealand economy is linked to the mortgage market. It's linked to real estate
Crazy.
in some way, shape, or form, right? It's an enormous lever for the government to pull. OCR is the primary
Yes.
lever for New Zealand economic policy, right?
Yeah.
And so tokenization of real estate means we can validate ownership of the title of the property. So that goes on chain. So now there's a blockchain recorded evidence of the property itself. And then we can fractionalize ownership in that. You can have a validated asset that you can trade that represents a share in a piece of real estate. So now you don't need to have a 20% deposit to buy a house. You can buy a piece of a house. You could buy 10 grand's worth of a house. And you can trade that. So you could ride the property market, but with real ownership. Like there's ETFs and stuff at the moment that you can use to invest in real estate, right? There's funds that are buying property, and you can invest in those funds
Yes.
and benefit from the growth of the property market. But you don't own shit. You own shares in yield, right? You own an interest in some yield. But this is talking about actual ownership of real world assets, and in particular property. So that's the big one I'm seeing in New Zealand right now. I know there's been some stuff going on in agriculture, farming, carbon credits. There's some stuff going on. So there was even a racehorse one that came out not too long ago where
Yes,
they
I
were
saw that.
tokenizing racehorse ownership, which is an interesting one. And I think that tokenization of athletes is coming. Tokenization of agriculture is a big one where you can invest in harvests and things like that. So we've seen early cases of that. So there's some really interesting use cases around this idea of turning my magical internet money into something tangible that has real world value. And obviously real estate it lends itself nicely to that idea. And I really believe that. So I'm definitely seeing this. I'm aware of projects that are going on in the market, tokenization of real estate. We've got an event coming up where I'm hoping to bring government and regulation, the regulators into the conversation, because I think that there's a huge opportunity for the New Zealand government and New Zealand in the tokenization of real estate. I believe that we could be a world leader, and we are very close. We're closer than we already think. If you go down the rabbit hole, we already have electronic titles. So we already have digital versions of property titles. That's one script away from being on chain. We have already legislation around, group ownership of real estate. That's already a thing in New Zealand law, lends itself perfectly to this example. So we're really close in terms of regulation, in terms of legislation to have a thriving tokenized real estate market. And it's coming, whether the regulators and the government participate or not, because we're seeing it happen all around the world, right? I know the reason you're asking questions is because it's a hot topic, and I'm sure people that are watching this podcast probably heard about it before. So it's coming whether you like it or not, but there's a real opportunity for the GDP of New Zealand in the tokenization of real estate. You would remember from your NFT days, and I'm assuming you're a Bored Ape guy because you look like you had a go in your shirt, you're rolling. So there's the smart contracts that were used in those days to deliver or deploy those products had built-in royalty components, right? And this is the big thing I think that is not on the table, is if the government was the primary deployer wallet of all real estate in New Zealand, of all Crown land, what it's called here in New Zealand, they could deploy each blockchain smart contract representing the title and build a royalty layer into those contracts.
Absolutely.
Which basically introduces this type of stamp duty to New Zealand. Now, I can hear the hate coming for me, like, fuck off, Trevor, why should the government get that? But the reality is, our entire economy is underpinned by the mortgage market. And if we have a free running tokenization of real world assets going without regulation and without government oversight, nobody but the owners of those assets benefit from it. So it's great for me as a property owner. I'll tokenize my house in a minute, right? Because forever, every time somebody buys a piece of it, I'm going to make money forever, right?
Yes.
That's the reality of what we're talking about. So this forever kind of fractional payment or royalty payment on the transactions going on in my tokenized property benefits just me. But if it was the government, it's now a massive source of revenue for the country. And, you know, Luxem's talking about growth. He's talking about, you know, how do we pull New Zealand out of its post-COVID slump? Well, we are a script and a stroke of the pen away from having a tokenized real estate industry and being one of the first in the world and possibly the leader in the world in that space. And it's an enormous amount of potential revenue that's sitting there for the taking. So I think that's the big one coming over the next 12 to 24.
I would agree with that. And I'm seeing a lot of similar type of markets. Another one that I interviewed this guy from based out of Vancouver, because, you know, Vancouver has extremely inflated property pricing, even more so than Auckland. And
I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Anyway, sorry.
It's like their medium price is something like 2 million or something. It is insane. It is, and the median income is not that much different there. So it is.
So it's even more broken.
Like anything. It's more expensive than anywhere else in North America. The only exception would be Bay Area in US, but that has much higher incomes. Whereas Vancouver doesn't have the incomes, but the property market. But once again, I was talking with an RWA in that property market, and they're doing, and then they're also then once again, as soon as it is fractionalized or not fractionalized but tokenized, then you can add so much more innovation to it, and you kind of liberate it in a way. You can do borrowing and lending protocols being built on it, or staking and liquidity.
It's an enormous opportunity, right? So it has an immediate impact, i.e., people can actually own. So I use this as a really terrible example. My brother, his first house he bought with a couple of his mates. So three of them got together. It's not an uncommon thing, especially in Auckland, right? And then when they went to sell it, like one of them got married and he's like, I'm going to fuck off now and have a family. So I want out of this house. It became a really big problem for them to figure out. One wanted to stay. The other one was like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Tokenization. I mean, it's such a terrible example because it's such a small thing, but a common thing solves that, right? I've got a third of the property on chain. It's an asset. I can transfer the ownership of that asset to somebody else. Somebody can buy my third of this house and they don't have to live here. They can just own a third of the house. And when the house value goes up, they can sell that third and make a profit, right? So it does open up a whole new world of financial products that are available built on the mortgage market, which is still the most secure thing, right? We pay our mortgage before we eat, right? Like your mortgage is the first thing that comes out of your bank account every payday. You pay your mortgage. It's the number one thing. So default rates on mortgages are super low as a result of that. So it's a secure, solid, real world, tangible financial market that will be tokenized and taken on chain. And then, as you say, an enormous number of additional value adds and opportunities for financial sovereignty come up out of that. So that's why it's going to happen. That's why I think it's so important right now. There's no stopping it. Everybody who kind of gets it goes, oh shit, that's just a better system. Let's do that. And the government needs to go.
It is the thing is that you know, startups move fast, like especially in Web3 space, AI space, but then corporates and larger enterprise move slower, and then government moves even a lot slower. So it's just something that will take time, but we will get there. And of course, there are a lot of, like, you know, when property is such a complex topic that it's so many issues associated with the supply side of things.
It's so old and ingrained, right? We've been selling real estate the same way for fucking hundreds of years, right?
Yes.
And so everything's built around it. There's a lot to disrupt. I think one of the big ones and unique to blockchain and crypto in terms of government engagement is it's a hot potato. Like nobody wants to be the one to pick it up, right? There's no advocate. Who's the advocate in New Zealand government for blockchain and crypto? Who's out there actively talking about blockchain and crypto? 1 million Kiwis own crypto. 1 million Kiwis own crypto. And there's not a single politician talking about it. Why? Because it's hard to understand. It's complicated, and you're probably going to fuck it up and look like a fool. And so nobody wants to take that chance. Nobody wants to be the one that sort of goes, blockchain, it's going to be great. And then the first question comes in, I have no idea what I'm talking about. So I think there needs to be, and that's a great role for something like Blockchain New Zealand to play, is to be in Australia, they have what they call a Friends of Blockchain. So DECA, our counterpart, Blockchain New Zealand's counterpart in Australia, has set up a think tank, with politicians, regulators, industry representatives, and a mediator, which is, the organizational body, DECA. Shout out to Amy Rose. She's amazing. And they've got this community, this small kind of think tank group that's working through it. And that alone has fast-tracked Australia. They're now growing in this space really quickly. And it looks like, being an election year this year over there, that they've got advocacy on both sides of government now, and it's becoming a bigger part of the mainstream narrative, because they're in the same boat. They're roughly 1 in 5 Aussies own crypto. The stats are pretty similar between us and Australia. Surprise, surprise. And so, what's that? 5-6 million Aussies? That's a very big market, right?
Yeah.
And so it's great to start seeing government conversation, advocacy for it, politicians taking the time to learn and understand what digital assets are, and what digital asset management looks like, and what digital asset regulation looks like. Because the easy thing that you're seeing is trying to stuff a square peg into a round hole, right? It's like, we have these frameworks and these financial laws. How do we just make it fit into that?
Yes.
And it doesn't. These are new types of assets. It's a new asset class that we've never seen before. And so it needs to be approached in that way. We regulated things as they came through, as financial products and new markets open up. Regulators take control. It's just weird that this one has gotten so far without any fucking regulation, right? Like, I could drop a token tomorrow out of a jurisdiction not New Zealand, and I can basically trade a financial product in a completely unregulated way. And to do that would take me about an hour on my laptop.
Exactly right. Yes.
It's not hard for me to produce and deploy a digital asset.
Yes.
And there's no regulation. If I go to certain jurisdictions, and there's, and that's why one of the biggest things that's hampering the market here in New Zealand is that lack of certainty. Without that certainty, why do I play here? We've got some super innovative companies. We've got companies that have gone from zero to unicorn, billion-dollar valuations in 18 months in blockchain and crypto. It is an enormously fast-moving space.
Yes.
It's, I believe, the fastest growing market or industry in human documented history.
Absolutely.
And the amount of money going into it globally is mind-boggling.
Yes.
And the companies in New Zealand that are at the forefront of that are building the tech, that they're pioneers, they're the number 8 wires, fuck around and find out guys that are really going for it. They're not setting up in New Zealand.
Yeah.
They're setting up in different jurisdictions because of the lack of certainty. So we're getting brain drain. Jobs are going overseas. Revenue's going overseas. None of it's coming to New Zealand.
Absolutely.
Because no one wants to take ownership of this thing. And it's like, what the hell, right? Like, there's so much opportunity for the country here. And there's so many people that care about it.
Yeah.
But we just, and the more I sort of dig into it, the more I realize how well positioned we are. Like, it's not a complicated problem for us to solve here.
Yes.
This is not a huge fish to skin, right? Like, it's a really simple couple of strokes of legislation and some simple guidelines, and we're away. And we've got a sandbox. We got a sandbox last year. Great. We've got a couple of projects coming through a sandbox. That's just a drop in the ocean, man. Like, okay, great. That's a way to get there. But the industry's growing. It doesn't give a fuck about a sandbox. Doesn't care. It'll find a way around the law.
Exactly.
So
right.
regulators just have to get up to the plate and not just wait until they see a few use cases and what's going on overseas. Because it's going to happen whether you are paying attention or not.
Absolutely.
And it's all going overseas. It's all just flying out the door.
It is. It's like, I have been running a podcast for last 5 years nearly, interviewed over 300 founders, top tier founders, everyone from Vitalik to most of the L1, L2 chain founders around the world and traveled extensively, it is much more likely for me to meet a Kiwi founder overseas
Overseas.
than in New Zealand
In
in
Web3.
Web3. So
Yeah.
pretty much it's like it's
100%.
you have to be
100%.
yeah, and just like earlier we were talking before pressing the record button, how Dubai is becoming the center of this industry, and
Yep.
because they've had
So-
Vara and all those like
So the biggest companies
yes,
of the next 10 years
yeah,
are coming out of Web3, right? Like we're rebuilding the internet. Like Web2 spawned the biggest companies on the planet. Meta,
Yes.
Facebook, Meta, Google,
Amazon,
Amazon, all came from Web2, right? Like
Yeah,
this
yeah.
ability to write and trade and commerce and
Yeah.
scale on the internet bred the biggest companies on the planet. Well, the next Web3 is
Yeah.
coming. So the third iteration of the internet's being built, and the biggest companies on the planet are growing now.
Yes.
And so Dubai's gone, we want them here. So they've
Exactly
gone
right.
zero tax. If you need a license for something, we'll rush it through for you.
Yes.
We'll even fund your setup. So we are
Yeah.
looking at going to Dubai with Avatars Global and setting up over there because there's so much opportunity available for us there
Yes.
that's not in New Zealand that
Yeah.
we're like, why would we set up here? Like, why? There's
Yeah.
no benefit to my company setting up here in New Zealand. In fact, there's just uncertainty. And I
Yes.
could end up building a business in a jurisdiction where a regulation comes through that completely destroys my my operation. I'm not prepared to take that risk. I move to Dubai, they give me money, they give me infrastructure, they give me access to capital, and they give me zero tax. And they've got rebate incentives and grants that are government funded for international businesses. So they're paying international companies and saying, if you
Yeah.
spend money here, we'll give it back to you. Not only do
Yes.
you not pay tax on anything you earn, but any money you spend, we'll give it back to you up to a
Yeah.
point. Like
Yeah.
you couldn't ask for an easier pathway. And so what's happening? Everybody's going there.
Yeah.
All of these major companies, Binance's, all of these companies are setting up in the UAE. And it's the hub, global hub for all of this industry. And the UAE are going to be the foundational country for all of the next biggest companies in the world. They're all going to be based out of Dubai in this industry.
Yes.
And why not New Zealand? Why wouldn't you set up here? It's a beautiful country. It's a great place to live. It's safe. It's pretty. The temperature's good. The food's good. Like we have so much to offer.
Yes.
And just because nobody wants to advocate and have the conversation and get things moving,
Exactly.
we're missing it. Companies like us, like we're a startup. Avatars Global's a startup. We're nearly 2 years in. We've scaled from 4 to 14, and
Yes.
and we're now starting to win enterprise level clients, and we're deploying our own IP. So we're scaling company,
Yeah.
and we're not looking at New Zealand, and we should be.
Yeah.
We should be. We should have all of the opportunities in the world in front of us in New Zealand. I can't even get a New Zealand VC at the table. I'm on VC calls every week. I'm having at least 3 or 4 VC calls a week, and all of them are out of the US
Yes.
or the UAE.
Yeah.
Nothing in New Zealand. They don't even talk to me because there's there's just no
they
industry.
don't even understand industry, so they are
It's
still
bad. It's
in,
bonkers.
They are still in the early
It's
2000s.
bonkers.
You
Yeah,
know, like they're functioning as if it's 2004, 5 or something. Yes. So
Yeah.
but I completely understand your sentiment. So what's next for BlockchainNZ?
Yeah, cool. And great wrangling it back. My ADHD brain bounces all over the place. So blockchain New Zealand it's shaping up to be a good year, 2025. And Trump election, crypto being a mainstream narrative, happening in Australia, more people asking about it.
Yes.
There's a groundswell of activity happening globally in the space, despite what the markets might say. And I think New Zealand is in for a big year as a result of that. Blockchain New Zealand, I'm putting together a handful of events, the biggest of which is our first major crypto conference. So it'll be the first time New Zealand has something. We're putting a flag on the blockchain and crypto conference circuit globally. The event will be held in Queenstown in August. It's called Crypto Winter. So we're we're finalizing sponsorships and things at the moment. And once
Fantastic.
that's all locked in, we'll start producing all of the event materials and getting that out. But that should be hopefully a significant step for the industry locally to have something that's celebrating, showcasing, and advocating for the industry here on a global scale. We've got a submission to government. We lost Minister Bailey after all the work that my predecessor did to get Minister Bailey at the table and to have those conversations going on in government here. Minister Bailey's been moved, and we've got new leadership in our department now that we've got to re-engage with. So we're putting a submission together to try and get a conversation started to get something like what's happening in Australia going on. Interestingly, Albanese has appointed a digital assets manager as an advisor into the Australian government. I mean, that's just an easy thing that New Zealand government could be doing. Appoint somebody who understands this shit to talk to you about it and tell you what's going on, why trillions of dollars are being poured into this industry globally. Why? Find out and have somebody who's in there that understands the space. I think that's a really big thing. So we're trying to get that happening this year if we can. So those are the big things, but there's always stuff going on across the industry. So if you are just interested in understanding blockchain a little bit more, we've got a really basic level of membership, and you can access resources and get connected and come to social events and different things and learn more about what's happening in the space. So that's a function that we provide. And then for the Binances, the easy cryptos, the future verses of the world, we are championing the business case and commercial case for blockchain in New Zealand. So those are the two main kind of remits. And the big challenge we're trying to tackle this year through all of that is the banking stuff, right? Like I think that's where the biggest opportunity from a regulation point of view to help move the industry along is the banking issue. I mean, Binance, my understanding is, and I'm probably going to get fact checked on this one, but I'm pretty sure Binance is one of the largest players in the space, a $1 trillion company.
They're pretty big.
They can't get a bank account in New Zealand, right?
Yes.
Like, what the fuck?
I know.
They can't get a bank account in New Zealand.
A lot of my friends, founder friends, building startups in this space, they've all had the same issue.
Can't get a bank
New
account.
Zealand cannot get a bank account.
If you can't get a bank account, you can't run a business. How do you run a business if you can't even get a bank account? So that alone means I have to go offshore. Not even the fact that it's the regulation's not clear, and I don't know if I'm going to be laying my bed somewhere where it's going to get kicked over. All of that stuff aside, I can't even get a freaking bank account to pay my staff and pay my bills and get a credit card to pay my freaking HubSpot subscription. It's so there's these really fundamental things that we could be addressing here really quickly. And so, those are the big things on the agenda for Blockchain New Zealand. We've got Hong Kong and Singapore in our region, and I'm working hard to build pathways to Hong Kong and Singapore for New Zealand businesses. 6.5 but Hong Kong and Singapore are thriving hubs for blockchain and crypto commerce, and they are on the stage with Dubai. They're on the stage with the US as one of the leading regions in the world, and they're in APAC. So I think there's a huge opportunity for us to forge relationships, not just with Australia, because that's kind of the tried and tested pathway. The seventh state. We go straight to Singapore and Hong Kong and build those networks, those relationships, leverage what's going on in those markets, and bring them to New Zealand. Like I said before, why not? I think we can attract some major businesses to New Zealand that would set up here if we made it a hub where there was friendly regulation. I mean, do we go as far as Dubai? Maybe for a little while. It's tax-free and there's incentives and all of that. That's potentially a way we could go. That would have an immediate impact on the ecosystem and the industry here. But even just a few steps back from that, there's some really easy opportunities we've talked about already with tokenization of real estate, the digital identity piece, banking, just getting some government advocacy with the major banks to help start banking crypto businesses and help grease the wheels. A lot of this stuff is really easy and shouldn't take us much to get going. Yeah.
Absolutely. So final question, where do people find you? How can they connect with you? How can they join BlockchainNZ?
You can send a handwritten letter to,
Send a fax.
Yeah, send a fax.
Yeah.
Well, blockchain.org.nz is home base for BlockchainNZ. So most of the information that you would want to know is there. We have, obviously, we're pretty active on LinkedIn and X, so you can follow us on those socials. And once you become a member, we've got internal portals and Slack channels and things that you can connect with the broader or national blockchain community. We've got a pretty big membership too. We've got around 80 members, which is companies that are engaged with Blockchain New Zealand business members. So there's a pretty substantial, most of the industry is already connected. So it's great that the industry supports the organization, and I encourage more to do so. But I think there's opportunities outside of just blockchain and crypto businesses. And we've talked about a big one today, which is this tokenization of real estate. So I encourage businesses like, Ray White, Harcourts, Barfoot and Thompson's, those guys should be participating in Blockchain NZ. They should be members and be leveraging the infrastructure and companies that are in our community to help them understand tokenization of real estate and how they might roll that out through their business models, because it's going to be fast and it's going to be massive and it's going to be a new way for people to invest. So it's going to be huge. Me personally, you can follow me on LinkedIn. It's probably my most active platform. I'm also on X, and you can check out my other businesses. DRX.store is a part of Futureverse for those of you who are following along there, and avatarsglobal.com is our kind of AI, blockchain, Web3 merging entertainment business, which is a lot of fun.
Yep. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Trevor, so much for sharing everything and sharing your wisdom, knowledge about the whole New Zealand market. It's always good to get a perspective from the regulation side and how the industry is moving here. And I mean, of course, we all want to see the growth of the space. So hopefully
100%.
we should do this again in
Absolutely.
3 to 6 months.
Yeah. Happy to do that. Yeah, of course. Always keen for a chat. And don't forget, you get the Bitcoin price you deserve. See you later.
Thank you. Cheers. Thank you for tuning into this conversation with Binance New Zealand. Make sure to subscribe, follow, and engage with Binance New Zealand on social media. You can find us on Twitter at Binance_NZL or on Instagram, Binance New Zealand, one word. As well as you can also go to our website at binance.com. And finally, please note that this discussion includes insights from non-affiliated third parties and key opinion leaders. Binance provides this platform for informational and educational purposes only and is not responsible for any content or insights provided. This information should not be considered as financial, tax, or investment advice from Binance.